Good morning, everybody. Hey, how's it going?
Good
We're
morning,
laughing. We're laughing
Steve.
because we're
Good
always
morning.
starting it. It's always the startup of this program. This program is always a little, it just feels a little weird. I guess I got to change that music at some point to something that makes me, you know, that more befits. Let's just say the music is maybe too grandiose. I don't know. What do you think for a couple of guys like us?
I feel like I'm blooming. It's the emergent spiritual music that you can't be sad and listen to it. It pulls you forward. Nah, it's great. I love that.
Okay, so we end up laughing, but today's not a laughing day.
It
Today
is
has
not.
a good bit of somberness to it, if that's a word.
Somberness on many different levels, but the most obvious one would be the situation in the Ukraine and the horror that Europe is at war again. I think we would all like to have thought that World War II taught us enough to know that this is not a good idea.
And it's quite concerning to see how far this is going. Now we've got definitely an isolationist tone in the United States. It's we've been involved in some big wars for a long time, and people are like, let's not get. I don't understand what Ukraine has to do with anything. So there's a strong isolationist tone going on in this country.
Mhm.
Uh, and yet it does have in the globalized economy, it has direct consequences for for you and me, right?
Well, and there's one level of it. There's multiple levels that affect us. There's a global economy. There is the, oh my gosh, are we going to get involved in another war? And is this our job? Welcome to being a part of NATO. Is that really, do we want to be a part of NATO? Is that not Europe's great challenge at this point, unless the United States, what's our role in NATO? But beyond all that, since this is a Christian program, what I would love to explore with you is what is the Christian response in this situation? I mean, we can argue on the political response and the military response, and is it good or bad? But is there a Christian response in this kind of situation when you have a sovereign nation invading another sovereign nation?
I would hope so. I'm this is I'll tell you, and I'll just be candid because I think this is a part of an equation I haven't really thought through a whole lot. I've thought about this from the standpoint of the United States starting wars and resorting to military action in I mean, we could debate all day long. You know, at the time, did it seem like the Iraq War was a good idea? Many
Hmm.
in the church, in our church, believe that it was not, and I think history has kind of borne out the fact that it really was ill conceived, and really quite disastrous. I've thought a lot about Christian responses and to when we're the aggressor, right?
Right.
Um, when it is a defensive war, I think it's different, and I'll have to admit I haven't thought about that
Hmm.
nearly as much. It's it's uh, it's not fair to say, well, gosh, Ukraine, get tough luck, because it really does bear upon a lot of things, and uh, I don't know the nuances of it, but anyway, yeah. So I ramble because I'm at a loss. I'm really at a loss on this one.
And I think that's the struggle. You just summed it up so well. As Christians, I think we are failing, and our denominational leaders have failed. And I put it squarely on from different denominations. And there's not one single denomination in my that I am aware of that gives clear and concise, this is who we are, and this is who we are in a world state situation, and this is how we respond. We have this, well, gosh, that seems so wrong, and I would love to do something, but I'm not sure what. And that is a failure of our leadership to posit a strong theological grounding in who we are when nations are at war. We've been so complicit with other nations at times, and our faith so complicit in national politics that we just don't even know how to respond to it.
Yeah, it's yeah, Bingo. But where do we go forward? How do we find that leadership? How do we establish that leadership? How do we express the voice that is appropriate for the time? Because I think that that we both know that, shall I say, the Council of Bishops is not going to they're not going to say anything that's particularly meaningful or helpful during this particular crisis.
That is
And
correct.
so where does that voice emerge and how does it emerge?
I will tell you that I had a very interesting experience at General Conference. The last time I was at General Conference, this would be the once every 4 year gathering of delegates from around the world, and saw, obviously on the progressive end of life, saw delegates from Russia who made it perfectly clear that if we were to take steps to liberalize our attitudes toward LGBTQ folks, that Putin would use that statement to arrest people, to murder people, and to close down Methodist churches. So they were the ones that brought, it's really easy to play theological games. They were the ones that brought it very close to home about this is a situation where there will be direct impact on people for what we believe. So you damn well better really believe it. You better be willing to risk people's lives for it. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's a really important aspect of faith when we talk about world politics and our responses, and the devastation that we don't have a collective response to evil. And that would be the question I had, that I wanted to get into you. Is a beginning step simply to label this evil?
Um, I would say so. I think we have to be very, very careful about how we do that,
Hmm?
because I boy, we're going to get into it this morning. This is
Yeah, I love it.
this is
Oh,
good. So I'm going to go back to World War II, okay? And I'm going to recite the narrative that I've heard all my life, okay? Is that the Japanese did a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor and destroyed our ships out of nowhere. That was it was an unprovoked attack, and it thrust us into to World War II. Okay, that's what I've heard and what I've
mhm.
understood most of my life. Well, it's not exactly true. There were provocative actions, and there was a power struggle going on that the Japanese were under a blockade, basically. Their energy supplies were being blockaded, and their response was to attack the United States in what they hoped would be a very quick, we're going to knock this out and take care of this problem, and the Western powers will not really be able to get into a long drawn out war. We're just going to be able to solve this problem. That's a little different story than what I grew up with. Okay, and what I'm saying by that is that there are always, whether it's in love and marriage, whether it's in geopolitical situations, there's always two sides to everything. Now, having said that, I don't want to sound like somebody that I don't want to sound like I'm saying, well, Putin did a smart thing. That's a very smart move. No, absolutely not. This is an incredibly destabilizing kind of move. It's going to make energy prices around the world spike. Big deal. Okay, we pay more at the gas pump. No, the whole world runs on those energy prices, and when they go up, things happen, and all wars are generally fought over resources. So it's very complicated, and it's right on the doorstep of Europe, and it's it we live in a world now where we can visit these places. We have visited these places. We know what this looks like. And we know people who are Ukrainian. We know people who are Russian. We have relationships with people. And I think maybe that's a start. Is as
Hmm.
a Christian response is to just on the very basic level, find our neighbors, engage with them, and listen.
It's interesting when you make so many good points, but to go back to okay, it's going to raise global energy prices. Okay, we're going to pay more for gas. And our natural tendency to say, well, that'll be unfortunate. But no, I don't think people grasp in this congregation or in the general middle class, upper middle class world that most of us live in. We see people every week that can barely make it. They are scraping by. And when we put gas in their tank, it means they can pay a bill. Part of our community assistance fund goes for gas for people because they can't literally afford to get gas to go to work. So just that at that level, maybe one response is, as you say, to be aware of our Ukrainian friends and neighbors, to make that connection. Another response is to
And our
say,
Russian
when
friends,
the
yeah.
and our Russian friends, and when those gas prices start going up, to recognize that there is a direct impact on people who are already at that line. So let's not see it as an inconvenience to us. Let's see it as there are going to be people that have that's going to be the last straw for them, and they will not make it.
And it's also, energy is a key component in everything else, right? In the price of everything else. So if energy prices go up, food prices go up because food is dependent upon various types of fuel to grow it, to harvest it, to ship it, and so it affects everything. It affects prices of everything. So here's a cool thought that actually kind of plays into a very theological point, and it just happens to coincide with last week's lectionary reading. How about that?
Okay. I love that.
So I'm a big fan of the "Love Your Enemies" passage. You may know that.
I know you are.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I tend to listen to the Matthew version more than I listen to the Luke version. Luke was the reading this week. And fine job with that, by the way. Fine job interpreting that for the congregation, and initiating that conversation. I have been puzzled for years over the fact that love your enemy, that in the Greek the word your is plural. And what I have, you say, so what? It's plural. Well, it does matter because it's not a kind of a individual love your neighbor. It's a collective love your neighbor. And I have come to interpret that as that how do you know who your love your enemy is? I guess what I need to be saying. It's love your neighbor too. But love your enemy. How do we know somebody is our enemy? How do we know the Russians are our enemies?
Right.
Because somebody told us. Have you ever been offended by a Russian? Have you ever been personally affected or personally harmed by Vladimir Putin?
Personally, on a personal level, yeah, no, of course not.
But our tribe, our nation has been at odds with, for a long time. I hear this, the drumbeat on the cable news channels. That's just, it's like they're up to no good. They're our enemies, and my point is, how do we know something is our enemy? How do we? Oh, Luann is saying she's getting no sound. Is that the case with everybody? Are we, let's see. Yeah. Somebody else. Yeah. Let us know if you're hearing us or not. If you're still on, you may have turned off because you can't hear us. But, the issue is, we generally, we know who our enemies are because somebody told us, and because our tribe has been informed that another tribe is our enemy, and this goes way back to the beginnings of humanity. And Jesus says, if you if you love those who love you and hate those who hate you, you're just like everybody else. You are to be different. You are to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So there's two folds there. This love your enemy, love the people who you have been told are your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, persecute your tribe, persecute you personally. And it's pretty comprehensive in that way. I think that perhaps a Christian response in this way is, again, love through listening, love through not taking the word of others that another people. I mean, there may be a conflict that we're involved in or we become involved in at some point, but people are, we are to love them. We are to love people, period.
I remember after 9/11, I was a pastor at Kern United Methodist Church when 9/11 happened. And they did a survey in the weeks following that Sunday that came immediately after 9/11. And it was some outrageously large percentage. I want to say like 60% of pastors never mentioned on that Sunday morning anything about what had happened. I mean, I rewrote my sermon and said, and explored, what's it mean to love our enemy in this moment? How do we love in this moment? Because you have to go, and how unnatural it is. And it is shocking to me that conversation we dismiss. It's that part of Jesus' teaching that we don't like because it's uncomfortable and it's intuitive to who we are in our world. And so therefore we ignore it when it's inconvenient. And the pastors, 60% of the pastors across the nation continued on as if nothing had happened because they weren't, and this is my perspective, I'd be curious to know if you agree, they were not capable of sustaining the conversation. They didn't know how to respond. And it's felt, let me tell you, as one who said we have to love our enemy, and I don't even know what that means right now, but that's who we are. It felt so inadequate to even proclaim that part of the gospel. So here we are, once again, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the background theologically to even know how to respond. So I love what you're bringing up is, what does it mean to listen? What does it mean to recognize that it's that every party in this conversation is going to come with an agenda and how they communicate the events, and that there are people in Russia that are just like us that don't know what is going on. They're just trying to raise their children and go to work too, and it's not an entire people. I mean, just that as a beginning point is a good starting place for Christians in response.
Yeah, and I remember in the 80s during the height of the Cold War. I'm going to quote Sting here. In the height of the Cold War, there was when we really did think that it could all just come to an end, very quickly. The tensions were so high. And Sting wrote a song, that had the line in it, in the chorus, "I hope the Russians love their children too." And I think that's a very Christian response, if I may say. I think that's a very Christian response. It's the hope that, it's that finding that thing that humanizes the enemy and the other, and just knowing that the Russian people don't really have a whole lot to do with what Putin is up to. They just like we don't really have anything to do with what our leaders do. We think we do. We think we have a vote and it's all important, but we really don't have that much power. And I say that after having worked across the street from the Senate for 5 years. We really just don't have a lot of power as individuals. We have to speak, we have to talk, we have to lobby, we have to fight for what is right. But we have not yet learned what a lot of people around the world have already learned, that, what their leaders do on their behalf is really not always, or most of the time, is not in their best interest. And
Right.
and therefore that means we must understand. Another thing I would like to say is that, when we talk about the hard teachings of Jesus, I think we also need to have all those tempered with, the statement where he says, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light." Um, and that doesn't sound right. That sounds paradoxical. Geez, you're talking
Right.
about some really hard thing, loving my enemy. I don't want to. I don't want to love my neighbor who yelled at me last week. Why am I called to do that? And it's because in learning how to do that and learning to listen, we find there's joy in it, because we're liberated. We're set free from the yoke of suspicion and hate and anxiety and all of that.
Hmm.
That's why I've loved traveling to the Middle East, because again, I grew up with a caricature of all Middle Eastern people as scary, as out to try to kill me, and they wouldn't like an American being around. And then you get there and you find out the hospitality is just off the chain, and the way they shower love on you is just such a remarkable kind of experience. And that has been very reorienting for me. So in my case, loving my enemy has meant listening to the story of those people who I've been told all my life are my
Yeah.
enemy and are out to
Right.
kill me, listening to their story, and then finding the joy of a new experience, a new meal, a new just experiencing hospitality in a way that I'd never experienced before. That's where I find that the yoke really is easy. Jesus' yoke is easy, and this burden is light. It's religion is supposed to be something that makes us live more abundantly. Not
Right.
it's not like a hard set of hardships that we must endure to go to heaven after we die. It's that we live, we find life, and we find it abundantly.
Hmm.
And it is counterintuitive to the way that we're taught in our normal kind of earthly lives. I think it's
And
wisdom
this
that's
goes back
beyond
to,
all that. Yeah.
when Steve and I, we kind of got on this feed 10 minutes prior to the beginning, and I said, welcome to the, it's a classic example of the modern dilemma. We now know what's going on in Ukraine. We can watch live on television what's going on in Ukraine and have no ability whatsoever to impact it. I mean, really, to make a difference on this in that moment. The modern dilemma is to have our heads full of thousands of images from around the world that we cannot have a serious impact in the moment. And one of the horrors of that is that sometimes we feel like, oh, we're citizens of the world. Yes, we are. But when it comes down to actual your code of ethics, your responsibility as a follower of Jesus Christ, 99% of that has to do with where can you have an impact? What are the relationships that are in front of you right now? What's the responsibility you have to share that sense of love and compassion? Exactly what you're talking about. The abundance of our life is found in those immediate relationships at work, at school, at home. Um, and that's where we have to focus because we've got nothing else. And that what's going on in Ukraine is that reminder of, if we're, I think if we're lucky, of a couple of things. First and foremost, it's for us Christians, we have to be reminded what is our first loyalty? What is our first priority? As Christians, we say it's Jesus Christ and the way of life that Jesus Christ has shown us. It's not the nation state. It's not my club. It's not even my family. As important as all those things are, they're not bad. But Jesus' way of life is primary. And how do I live that out? It's in those immediate relationships. It's in the immediate, how do I interact with people? And so, even in this moment, I think a good Christian response is to say, what's going on here? It's an elevated situation in terms of You are responsible for the role that you have in life. We have to deal with it, gosh, I'm not going to say this really well, so bear with me. I can only, if I'm a president of a country, then I am enlarging my scope of how much impact I can have on people, and the good I can do, and the evil I can do. And those personal demons that all of us struggle with, those personal temptations of greed and lust for power and having control of the others, those are elevated as well. But the great, great, great majority of us don't live there. All we have is the responsibility that we have to deal with our temptations in those personal lives. So I do think this is a time when we as Christians can say, let's pray for the situation, let's pray for the people in it, and be reminded who I am in my moment and whatever responsibility I have to carry out that life of Christ in front of me. That's what I'm responsible for ultimately.
And I mean, I was just thinking of so many different things while you were talking. I remember after 9/11, and there is kind of an analogy here in a certain sense. But I remember after 9/11, one of the things that I told a lot of people to do, and I asked a lot of people to do, and certainly people were asking the same of me. But find your Muslim neighbors and check in on them, see how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a lot of fear that there are terrorists lurking around every. What's that happens when you're caught off guard, when you're caught by surprise. You don't see something coming that's so dramatic, and you look around, you're paranoid. Where's the next attack? My gosh, I remember being so scared about, there was the anthrax thing happening at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just like it all just happened all at once, and it took a little bit of courage, I think, for people to reach out and find their Muslim neighbors, and especially Muslim women who are especially vulnerable during these kinds of things, and just check in with them. How you doing? What can I do to help? Do you need somebody to go to the grocery store with you, etc. I have a couple of Ukrainian friends here in D.C. I have a couple of, they're not first generation, but they come from Ukrainian families. One I'm very close to, and I will be contacting them today and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And maybe that's another Christian response, I think, that
Mm-hmm.
is important. And again, understanding that if there are, I do know that there are several Russian families in Oak Ridge, and to not shun them, make sure that they are still included in the love of the community, because they don't have anything to do with this,
Right.
and they're affected by it as well, and their lives are made difficult by the way somebody else is manipulating their reputation, etc. It's very it's very important to live a life of love, pure and simple.
Yeah. Yeah. This is kind of take an odd turn, but hearing you say that, it makes me very aware. Contacting the people that you are in connection with when a crisis happens, it's beyond your scope. It's outside our ability to start and stop. I want to bring it back to those of us who are in the East Tennessee area. Are the Roman Catholic bishop here? It was just announced and publicized. The Roman Catholic bishop is being investigated by the Vatican for, well, I don't know too many of the details, for allowing rape to go, that he knew about, to allow that to not be punished, to be brought to authorities. And so once again, in now East Tennessee with Bishop Sticka, you have this same conversation that's been going around Roman Catholic dioceses all over the world, and the Vatican getting involved, and the Vatican has not made an announcement about this. Hearing you say what you just did, what a perfect example of that's a little bit closer to home. And we can have absolutely the same response, checking on our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, checking on people that matter to us, that are even more devastated by the announcement. I mean, all of us as human beings are devastated by such an announcement, that someone in authority would allow such horror to go on. And Christians We're all going to suffer once again because this is taking place. It don't have to be Roman Catholic to suffer, but our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters are going to be devastated yet again, and here it is in our own backyard. And that's a very helpful comment you just made about how can we make a difference in someone's life.
I used to be I spent a fairly big part of my life trying to understand maybe ways of having a bigger microphone and being able to proclaim these truths from a taller mountaintop. I'm very, very fortunate that I got to do those things and to be a part of some really big conversations and to feel like I really had a notable impact on those conversations. But I've come back around to the idea. I guess this is what happens when you're starting to push 60, which I don't know how that's possible, but but it probably gets more that way the further down the path I get. But it's I really do value the impact that all of us can and must make in our interpersonal relationships.
Yep. And that's what our calling is, I think. When Jesus is talking about loving the enemy and loving your neighbor, don't make it harder than just that. Are
Yeah.
you showing grace and compassion to the people that you are in contact with?
Yep.
I mean, that's not all it is, but that's a good beginning point. Are you demanding justice for those who are marginalized? Are we open to acting where we can act? And I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier. Are you willing to act where you can act? Do that. That's the beginning point for our response, whether it's Russia or Roman Catholic Church in East Tennessee right now. It's got to be something we can bring to the table.
Well, I see that Luann's got her sound on. Yay, I'm so glad. Thanks you for being here. And we'll maybe turn the page a little bit. It is the top of the second half hour of the program. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Remember, this is an interactive conversation. So if you have a question or a comment or anything that you want us to flash on the screen, put it up there and let's go for it. Yeah.
Not only that, Steve usually asks me, what's going on at the church this weekend? You know, one thing that's going to happen that I'm very excited about? I'm going to go, I'm not sure if preaching is what should be called. I'm going to the Wesley Foundation at the University of Tennessee. That would be the United Methodist Student Center on Sunday evening to have dinner with them and participate in their worship service. And they asked, what do you want to preach on? And I said, well, I could definitely preach, but how about this? What if we just have a question and answer time where people are able to ask, the students are able to ask any question they want to ask, Bible, theology, church, United Methodist Church, anything. And I'll ask it anonymously, ask it confidentially, and it'll pop that up and then I'll answer them. And I'm so excited. I love doing that kind of thing. And it made me think of our gathering here, that people, those of you who are on this call, what we ask on a regular basis, instead of just saying, what are questions you'd like us to ask? What are questions you think these college students should ask about being Christian? What are the questions that, if you're a college student and you're just having your eyes open to some of the issues that we do as young adults, what were your questions when you were that young adult coming of age and finding independence and freedom? What are the questions that I think that will be good for me to address? Because my fear is that they're going to be all quiet and reserved and say, oh, we don't know this guy. Should we trust him to ask the real stuff? They'll ask lame questions like, what's your favorite verse in the Bible or something stupid like that. What I want them to ask is the really good stuff, How can the Christian church hold together when we're at such desperate odds about human sexuality? I want them to ask really substantive questions. But those of you who are watching, what were the questions you had when you were a young adult?
That's a good one. And we probably should revisit this next week to see if in fact your concerns were confirmed or if they were blown out of the water. Because I suspect that maybe young people today might be much more intent with their questions, and they may do their best to fry your head in the middle of
Love
such
it.
a Q and
Bring
A
it
thing.
on.
Yeah, I know, right?
Bring it on.
That's
I
exciting.
love that.
Yeah. So what
You
are
know
some
what this all
questions,
goes back
folks?
to?
Yeah. Yeah, go for it. Put them in the
You know what it
chat,
goes back
please.
to? I, as a youth at Trinity United Methodist Church, I don't remember who it was. I wish I could go back in time and and remember who this idiot pastor was. But we had a pastor who came to our youth group one night. It wasn't our minister, who was a visiting pastor. And he did this. He said, write down whatever, here's an index card. Here's your index card. Write down whatever you want the question to be, right? And most index cards are like this when you write on them. Well, I purposely turned my index card like this so I'd know when he got to my question. And I wrote, if drinking alcohol is wrong, then why did Noah get drunk in the Bible? And he's answering all these questions, and they're all, what's your favorite verse? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And he got to my question because he went and turned it sideways. And I was like, oh, here it comes. And he said, well, I'll answer this one later if there's more time. And then he blew it off and never came back to it. And I am still to this day angry. What a horrible, horrible pastor. Whoever you are out there, you're a horrible pastor.
That is a hilarious story.
And I'm still angry
in so many different ways. This is what happens when that kid who asks, the kid in 6th grade confirmation class asks you to explain the Trinity and explain, where Cain and Abel's wives came from. That's what happens when that kid becomes a pastor, right? All right.
Right.
Looks like we have
I am definitely there.
Yeah, I see one by Luann. Let's see if I can put that. How do I? Yeah, there we go. That's why we have to influence the decisions by all we allow to have the vocal voice. The vocal voice. How do I carve out time to be theological and do all the assignments? I also have to work to pay for these assignments. Yeah, I mean it's always a struggle, right? Thanks, Luann.
I think that's really excellent question. I think at a deeper level, it's the problem sometimes is deciding which assignment is going to have a value for me at this point in my spiritual journey. And part of the spirituality of it is knowing that what is it of the thousands of questions I can be asking, which are the ones I need to focus on and reflect on and pray about and read what has the Christian community said over 2,000 years about this topic. So it's not just a theological issue, it's a spirituality issue about what matters to me right now. What's the key issue that's I need to learn and grow, or is keeping me from learning and growing. So it's I think that's where I would say you need to explore spiritually what are the issues that are really pushing your buttons right now, and which of those many things you need to focus on first.
And that's discernment, right? That's discernment.
And as Luann knows, because she and I talk quite often about such things, we discern in a lot of different ways. Luann, I happen to know, discerns by talking things out. And so she needs an ear of someone to just talk through things with. Perfectly valid way of doing that. Some of us discern intuitively. It just one day it hits us. Most of us, though, we have to do the hard work of writing out, here's all the things I can think about. Here's all the stuff that's on my mind. And then to literally hold them up and say, okay, which of these is more important to me right now, this or this? Okay, it's not that. Which of these now, and I compare it and just get a classification system of what matters next, what matters most.
Very good. Very good. Well, when it's just the two of us, we don't have the luxury of having a safety word, a safe word to like opt out of the conversation. We're just, when we run out of stuff to talk about, we run out of stuff to talk about. Don't have a third person to jump in.
Well, no, I've got one. I've got a question for you. You
Okay.
talked about pushing 60. I'll just want you to know you'll always be 52 in my mind. Um, I the There's a lot of research done now. Richard Rohr wrote a book about spirituality for the second half of your life. There's more conversations going about spirituality now that the baby boomers are old and therefore that they're self-obsessed as a generation, and so we talk about ourselves. Um, what do you think are the issues that you've seen as you age that you've heard your whole life old people talk about and thought, what an idiotic idea or an idiotic issue? But now you're realizing, holy moly, that is a key issue for me because I've aged into that crisis.
Okay, I could look at that two different ways. One is to I could join in the complaint that I've heard all my life about older generations despairing the younger generations, right? When you and I were,
Very much.
younger Gen Xers, I still say that I am a Gen Xer, not a Boomer. So I have no memory of the Beatles. That had no effect on my life, and I think that is the key component of being a baby Boomer is being affected
I like that.
how your how the Beatles affected your life. Okay. Um, uh, you know, we were the Gen X was the slackers, this misaligned generation that would never amount to anything, and then along comes the millennials, and they're more maligned than the Xers were, and then there's the was it Gen Z, I guess, the Zoomers,
Mm-hmm.
who are again, and I just I could probably fall into that trap myself. I can't stand how young people don't know how to talk on a phone. I don't like there's their work ethic issues, their entitlement issues. There's all these things that I could go darn those kids. I could channel my best Jeff Kyle and ask them to get off my lawn. But the caution that I've always received in that regard is a quote that I something along the it's a a quote that I can't recall it exactly, but it was along the lines of well, the one thing that I really despair of the most is what's going to happen with the younger generation. They're not this and they're not that, and it was a quote by Socrates. So it's
Yeah.
it was a quote that took place a couple of thousand years ago. There have obviously been many younger generations who have come into being and come out by in that amount of time. So it's kind of comforting just to know that, well, if I'm worried about the younger generation and everybody else is worried about the next generation, that's just life. That's the way it always has been, and it'll always work out. So what is your how would you answer that question, Mark?
I will say my local experience of that is Gordon Goodgame, who was the pastor here at First United Methodist Church in the glory days of the church, and to hear the people of that have been a part of this church run, oh my gosh, it was so wonderful back then. Everything was perfect. I found the assessment that he did of the church. He actually came as a and did an assessment of the entire church prior to coming as its pastor. And there's this huge line. One of the very first things he says is, well, this church, the youth group and the children's ministry aren't nearly what it used to be. All the older folks are just upset that the children and youth ministries are going down the toilet. And it just made me, it's like, is that not the classic? Every generation says, well, it's not like it was when we were young.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, I would say for me, the issue of um, what's it mean to have value in my life. The closer you get to retirement, the closer you get to saying you have that self awareness of, wow, I'm going to die one day. The closer you get to that, I see in myself the struggle to say, what is of value? What do I need to spend my time on? What is not of value? But I bought into the hype of thinking this matters. Um, that's my struggle with spirituality in terms of spirituality that And it's okay to say there's a lot of stuff you have to do that doesn't have value, but you still got to do it. You got to put gas in your car. You got to go. You got to take care of it. You got to mow the yard. It's not because I think it matters, but where am I going to invest my time? Where am I going to invest my energy? That's would be is that I've heard people talk about. Oh, retirement changes you, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, for the good. Good Lord, I'm so ready. I was ready to retire at 32. I am ready to do that. But
I just
now
can't
I
help but
see the
think, there's my old Sunday school teacher, Jim Parks, is on this, probably still on this session today, and I'll bet, Jim, you're probably just kind of chuckling and laughing under your breath at this conversation. That's all I can say.
But it finally makes sense. The closer you get, my grandmother. Goes back for me as a very grandmother thing. Uh, she lived her entire life being my grandfather's wife. She was a homemaker. She raised the kids. She took care of my grandfather. It's all she ever knew. When he died, she was lost. She had no role. She had no sense of who she was. And that was such a cautionary tale to me to watch her completely. She had nothing of self investment beyond that one role. And now I understand that the closer you get, the older you get, you have to start saying, wow, who am I? And what does retirement mean to me? If I'm not doing this, do I have value? What is my value? That's a very real thing for me in the second half of my life.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations, because I don't think I haven't had that internal conversation because I know that I'm never going to get to retire.
That's a great way of
Thanks to my
solving that
own
dilemma.
thanks to my own career decisions through the years. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to ever get to retire, so that's fine. My theory is that a little bit of anxiety is a good thing to get you up in the morning. And if you've got somewhere to go, then that might make you
Yeah.
live longer. Maybe that's what I tell myself, at least.
Oh, that's
So
what makes me like preaching. I like to preach because it means I have one thing that matters that drives my week.
yeah,
I always have a sermon hanging over my head, and that's a good term. It's hanging over my head has the positive and negative connotations to it, but at least I know, crap, I got to get my act together. I'm going to be standing in front of a group of people, and I need something to say, and I hope they don't laugh at me. I want it to be something of value. So
well, right, and the rhythm, that it just. I remember Tim Ward saying, that just making an offhanded comment one time, said, "Yep, Sunday's always coming." It's like whatever you're
okay,
doing, whatever you're focused on in your life, whatever you want to be focused. Yeah, Sunday's always on its way, and you always have to have stuff ready for it, one way or the other. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Maybe that's something that keeps us sane, keeps us healthy. I don't know.
right. That's the anxiety that gets me out of bed in the morning. So when I retire, I plan on sleeping late.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, and saying "Welcome to Walmart. How can I help you? Here's a cart." That's what you're gonna say, right?
That's right.
All right. Anybody else got anything to add to this somewhat reflective, self-indulgent conversation? The real reason why we're talking about all this is, of course, that we were really not able to pin down anybody that to be our guest today. That's mostly my fault. Busy week last week, busy week this week, and reached out to a couple of people, didn't get an answer, probably didn't do it early enough. So what are we going to do going forward? We've got a few folks in the pipe. We still want to get Lori Jo, and she still wants to do this with us. And I think I have a workaround, Mark. Are you ready for it? If we
I'm ready.
have another problem with her internet and it not working, she doesn't actually have to appear. We want to look at her. We do. We want to see her
Hmm.
face, but we could also just kind of put her on through a phone call. That would work. So
Yeah.
we're gonna do that as a backup. And then we've got.
You, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I look forward to talking to Lori Joe not only about preaching, which I love that conversation, but one of the things Steve and I have talked about, and my wife Annette has been a part of the conversation, how many local church pastors are leaving local church ministry for other things. I would love to ask Lori Joe, from your perspective now, from the bureaucratic side as a district superintendent, what do you see? How do you approach that differently? We used to grieve, oh, that person left the local church. Oh, and now there's much more of a sense of, oh, good for them. They found where they connect. They found the next level of their ministry, the next place. That'll be a great conversation to have with her.
Yeah. I I think there was a New York Times article this week
Mm-hmm.
about the the huge numbers of clergy that are leaving to never do it again, and I think that's a tragedy. I think it's an understandable tragedy, but I would love to. That's one of my dreams has been to put together a coaching group with clergy who are secretly um, um, secretly thinking about leaving. They don't want to tell their superintendent yet because they know it might penalize them. They don't want to tell
Mm-hmm.
anybody in their congregation because they can't. They're afraid how the reaction might be, etc. But put together a coaching group and start really looking at vocation. My sense is I'm influenced by your old professor Stanley Hauerwas, who suggested that the morale crisis among clergy is not one of not taking enough vacations and not taking enough time for your family. Although those things are important, it's really more a matter of calling and knowing what you're called to. And being in touch with that spiritually. It's like Martin Luther, whenever he got in trouble, whenever he got challenged somewhere, he would just say, "I am baptized, I am baptized, I am
Mm-hmm.
baptized," because that's where it was for him. It's his baptism was the root of all that sprung forth in his Christian life from it.
And
So
that brings us
vocation is
back
so
full circle
important.
to
Yeah.
the conversation about how do we respond to the Ukraine. The beginning is to say, I'm baptized. My first loyalty is to Jesus and the way of life that he taught me, the reign of Christ, the reign of God in this world.
Yep.
My first loyalty is not to a nation state. And that's not just the ordained people, that's all of us as Christians. But that our calling, our sense of call, do those of you who are on this call, do you see that you are called to live a life, and by living that life you are making a statement to the world? That's a huge part of, and I think that's something we should talk with Lori Joe about. So
Yeah. And
I
I'm going to
I
make
love
a
that.
really, really controversial statement here. Our
Good.
life and our ideas about Russia and Ukraine are not informed by Rachel Maddow, nor are they informed by Tucker Carlson, but by Jesus. And therefore, as followers of Jesus, we can put all those other opinions into their proper place. But first and foremost, it's how would Jesus respond? And I think really, at least for me, the lens really is through that passage that you preached on this last Sunday.
And you know what's the sad reality is, we talk a good game as Christians about Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It's shocking to me to this day that if you preach a sermon or say what you just said, it really doesn't matter. Our first front loyalty is Jesus, not the United States or any number of other loyalties, our own family. How many people say, "Well, wait, what are you talking about?" That I mean, how much do we have to say Jesus is Lord? That phrase means something, but we have so dumbed it down, we've so watered it down that it still shocks people that you say, your first loyalty is to Jesus. That's still a controversial statement.
And remember, the context that that statement was struck in was because Augustus Caesar demanded that everybody call him Lord.
That's right.
Caesar is Lord, and so to say Jesus is Lord. That's why last week we talked a little bit about the Palm Sunday story and why I think it's a political satire.
Right.
His lordship is I mean he makes wouldn't it be crazy if he made fun of that concept that Caesar is Lord, and that the early church's assertion that Jesus is Lord is so radical, so very radical.
The equivalent would be saying Jesus is making America great again.
Mm.
It's or what's the Democrat idiotic little expression that we could make fun of and turn it into a Jesus statement? I mean, that's
Oh,
just
there are
it.
a
All
lot
these
of
political
them.
parties.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not picking on Republicans. It's every
Right.
political party
Yeah.
is suggesting that their platform is what's going to make life better. Welcome to the Christian faith, where we say no, that would be Jesus.
And even that, I feel like we have to qualify it. We're not talking about, if you're saved, you're going to be, if you accept Jesus into your heart and have your, say the sinner's prayer, it's going to make America better. That's not at all what we're talking
Yeah.
about. We're talking about, really internalizing and following Jesus's teachings.
A way of life.
A way of life. And I think about, again, bringing it back full circle. We got 4 minutes, folks. So, thanks for hanging in there with us today. I really appreciate it for such navel gazing. But, Bonhoeffer, we always like to cite Bonhoeffer these days. Well, remember that, Bonhoeffer's, he's kind of looking at his ethics are all formed in light of his position within a superpower at that time, right? So his response was measured by that. It doesn't really. I don't know how it speaks to. I don't know how it speaks to the situation where we're watching another tragedy unfold from afar. It's a different way of looking, a different vantage point. And so, yeah, I do think that we need some leadership. I think the church needs to lead in this time and say, what the heck, what is a Christian response when we see something like this unfolding? What do we do?
And it would be wonderful if the Ukrainian Christian church and the Russian Christian church were not so politicized that their comments about how this is unfolding would be what leads us in our initial conversation. If you had a non-politicized, non-corrupted church in both of those nation states to be able to say, this is what we see about following Jesus in this setting, that would be nice, as opposed to, again, that imperialistic kind of quality American Christians, like we think we know better than others. Because, Jesus was from Milwaukee. Jesus was, this is where it all originates from. Well, what an idiotic idea. The Ukrainian church was, how old was the Ukrainian church when, the United States became colonized? Good Lord, the Ukrainian church and Russian Orthodox church have a far greater lineage in faith than we do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thanks, Mark, for a good talk. I always look forward to this every week just because I get to check in with you and talk about big things, just like we used to do every Tuesday morning at the Super Kmart food court back in the day. If some of you are wondering what the heck I'm talking about, ask Mark what we used to do on Tuesday mornings at the food court at Kmart. Good times. Yeah.
Best $5 breakfast you could buy.
That's right. Yep. All right, man. Well,
all right.
We'll talk at you next week, and we'll have a stimulating guest. And I greatly appreciate those of you who have stayed with us this morning. Much appreciated.
Very much. Bye.